Good morning, friends. After the learning about the novel of The Flower and the Glory and the introduction to the author, and now we are going to learn about the characters in the novel. See which are the characters in the novel. First, Anita, a dead 5-year-old girl at whose grave Padre Jose refuses to pray. Remember, friends, listen carefully, so that's why you can also remember the objectives in that particular text. Anita, the first character, a dead 5-year-old girl at whose grave Padre Jose refuses to pray. Next character, Beckley Henry, the director of the correspondence school, who sends choral fellows packets of school lessons that are far more elementary than her chronological potential. Next character, Brigitta, the illegitimate daughter of the fugitive priest protagonist. Calver James, an American bank robber and murderer, pursued by the Mexican police throughout the novel, he is finally killed. Next character, Father, the new priest who arrives at the end of the novel to replace the executed priest that is the protagonist. Fellows, Captain Charles, the operator of the Central American Banana Company. Fellows, Coral, the fellow's precocious daughter. Fellows, Mrs. Trixie, Fellow's wife. The half caste, a mestizo, the Judas who betrays the priest. An Indian woman. Her child is shot by either Calver or by the soldiers who are pursuing Calver. The Jefe, the lieutenant superior, Mr. Lair, a Protestant living in one of the less vehemently anti religious Mexican states. Miss Lair, his short sighted sister. The lieutenant, out of a sense of duty, he stalks the priest protagonist from the beginning of the novel until its end. Finally, he captures him. Lopez, a hostage who was executed before an action of the novel begins for helping priest escape. Next character, Luis, a 14-year-old Mexican boy. He rebels against the sentimentality of his mother's stories about young Juan. Luis' father, a cynical, disillusioned man who believes that his wife's Catholic faith is futile, naive folly. Next character, Luis' mother. She fervently and dramatically reads to Luis and his two sisters from the Holy Book. Next character, Maria, the mother of Brigitta, the priest protagonist's daughter. Miguel, he is taken as a hostage and is beaten by the police. Next character, Montes Pedro, the hostage killed, and Concepcion, the priest protagonist, calls himself Montes afterwards. Next, Padre Jose, he is a priest who was forced to marry by state regulations and thus he was excommunicated. Padre Jose's wife, next character, a fat and bossy shrew. The priest, Alice Montes, the protagonist or main character of the novel, the only active priest still in Mexico. Next character, a pious woman. She condemns the priest protagonist for his bad spirituality during their night in jail. Next character, Mr. Tench, a dentist who is trapped in Mexico because of the economy. Next, Tench Sylvia, his estranged wife. Next character, young Juan, a perfect little boy in a religious story who will become, we assume, a plaster saint. Louis' mother reads stories in the Holy Book about him to her children. Those are the characters in the novel. The next is about the Graham Greene's treatment of characters in The Power and the Glory. Graham Greene's characters are vibrant and intense and do not bear resemblance to traditional characters of earlier English drama or fiction. They are not types but archetypes and are primary or symbolic characters in essential human condition. like the characters in a morality play. This is why the two major characters are nameless. But what is unusual is that no matter how typed they may seem, they grow morally and emotionally. The two main characters in the novel are the priest and the lieutenant. The priest, who is the hero of the novel, is trapped in a highly dangerous situation. His duty is to serve the Catholic community in the Mexican state, where active priests are arrested and killed. He tries to stay alive because he wants to continue his service to God. There is constantly a conflict in his mind about whether to remain in Mexico or to escape. When he reaches a port where he can escape in a steamboat, he is called by a sick woman who wishes to confess her sins. He goes to her, and the steamboat leaves without him. The reader wonders if he is a martyr or a saint because he not only has inadequacies and weaknesses, he is a semi alcoholic and has fathered an illegitimate child, illegitimate child, but continuously upbraids himself for them. At the same time, the more he regards himself as a failure, the more he shows the virtue of humility. He is regarded as a criminal in the eyes of the law and the sinner in the eyes of devotee Catholics. He is judged wanting by others, but he himself does not judge others. He knows his own weaknesses and has love and compassion in his heart, even for the mestizo who he knows will betray him. When he dies after being caught by the lieutenant, he becomes the martyr he had never dared to aspire to become. The lieutenant is an upholder of law and not a villain, though he is a hunter and an opponent of the priest. Perhaps this is because both the pursuer and the pursued are representatives of opposing spiritual worlds. He is a fanatically dedicated and intelligently resourceful Marxist assisted by soldiers and the police. Both the Catholic priest and the atheist lieutenant are idealists. Both work hard for their ideals. Both have sympathy for the villagers, particularly the poor and children, and both are ideologically opposed. During their meetings, the lieutenant begins to feel sympathy and respect for the priest. This is why, though it is illegal, he fetches a confessor, the cowardly Padre Jose, and a bottle of brandy for him. So both the priest and the lieutenant are anonymous and both have dialectically representative roles. While the hero is unquestionably the priest, the lieutenant's view is also given importance to balance between the bad hero and the good villain, to suggest their equal status as fallen men, and to point their recognition of human qualities each other. The next, some observations on the power and the glory. The Power and the Glory is one of the most powerful of Green's major novels, and the one considered by most critics to be his finest. The theme of the hunted man established an exciting and nightmarish atmosphere to the novel, which is like a thriller. But there is much more in it than a simple manhunt. Green has created characters that are human and symbolic at the same time. The priest and the lieutenant represent the dualism in the human spirit: godliness as opposed to godliness, love as against hatred, spirituality as against materialism, and concern for the individual as against concern for the nation. After the lieutenant captures the priest, there is the dialogue between the two men which lies at the heart of the story of good and evil. The lieutenant's ambition to catch this man is a disinterested one. He has no personal enmity towards the priest, but sees him as a symbol of poor who are corrupted by the church. He is a nihilist who wants to destroy the church along with memories, along with his own unhappy childhood. Though the lieutenant is the atheist is of the priest, antithesis of the priest, his obsession with the hunt and his dedication to his job of eradicating Catholicism led him to lead a life that is priest like. For example, he lives in very simple lodgings. The lieutenants hunt for and persecution of the priest turned the priest into a martyr in the eyes of the people. The lieutenant hates the rich and loves poor, but he cannot understand or tolerate pain. On the other hand, the priest has endured pain, anxiety, and guilt for years, but sees in his suffering the presence of God's love. The priest is very conscious of his weakness and the failure, both as a man and as a priest. An alcoholic, a scandalous priest with an illegitimate child, a man terrified of pain and death. He has no illusions about himself. In fact, his self knowledge raises him to the level of the hero. He is redeemed in our eyes by his keen sense of responsibility for his sins and for the suffering he has brought upon others. His purgatory is in Mexico in his years of light and in his tormented conscience. He accepts his loss of peace in the belief that the only reason God denies him rest is so that he could save a soul. After he sees Brigitta, his love and sense of responsibility for this child overwhelm him. Through her, he finds his salvation. The lieutenant and the priest provide a foil for each other, and one realizes that the lieutenant needs the priest to absorb his hatred. This symbolic relationship between the two characters is of fundamental importance to the novel. This is about some observations on the power and the glory and the character of the priest and the other characters in the novel. Next is conflict between good and evil in the power and the glory. The problem of conflict between evil and good is prominent in the novel. Green believes that in the ultimate analysis, it is God's justice that is predominant over man's idea of justice. The problem of evil and suffering is at the center of human tragedy. When good and evil are engaged in a fight, the fate of this battle depends on the fortitude and integrity of each individual involved in it. In this novel, Green shows a situation where cruelty, corruption have full sway, and crime, lust, and unhappiness fill the land. This is a world of sin and suffering. The protagonist is a priest who does wrong and who is aware of his corruption. When he was young, he suffered from the sins of pride, complacency, weakness for drink, as well as the sin of the flesh. As he grows older, his sins increase. He is aware of his sin, evil and sin, and is unable to do anything to save himself from damnation. Green shows that both Padre Jose and the whiskey priest are aware of their sacrilege. The real battle between the forces of good and evil takes place in the soul of the priest. In his death, the evil is defeated and the forces of good transform the priest into a saint. Next point of view is that the power and the glory as a reflection of the socio-political situation. This novel shows a state where religion has been outlawed. Only two priests are left to carry on the word of the gospel. One of them, that is Padre Jose, marries and bids farewell to his vocation. The other is the whiskey priest who indulges in illicit sex, gluttony, pride, and drinking. He also suffers from cowardice and flees the parish, but he cannot bring himself to leave his faith. He knows that he is sinning but is incapable of saving himself. The priest is a man hunted by the law because this is a state where the church has been banished from the land and the people do not have the freedom to follow their faith. This is a place where there is a religious persecution, a world that is full of squalor, dissolution, wanton cruelty, and corruption. Yet the people have a desperate need for faith, and it is this that may save them from sterile civilization and graceless materialism. Thus, this is the perfect locale for the depiction of the Green's story. So here we can understand that is Green's power and the glory uses the technique of the thriller, that of the hunter and the hunted, having all the ingredients of betrayal, chase and hunt. But as Green becomes involved with more profound themes, he uses a more complex technique with the use of symbolism and emphasis on subtle psychological aspects. So, a study of the Ava novel, which are representative texts, gives an idea of the literary trends during a particular period in English literature. They also indicate some aspects of the philosophy and style of that particular writer. Such a study enables the reader to understand how the novel evolved as a literary form and how it was shaped by the period in which it was written. Literature grows out of life, and a literary artist tries to reflect the microcosm, the individual's world, as well as the microcosm, the outside world, in his or her art. While doing so, the artist weaves together various threads of plot and characterization by using a narrative technique that suits him best to build a structure that feels aesthetically and logically satisfying. While studying the novels prescribed for study, it is important to analyze them in the light of these factors. Though a study of the critical works is useful, a careful reading of the text is essential for the proper understanding and appreciation of the novel. The critical works suggested are a preliminary guideline, and the student is expected to analyze the text and form an independent opinion after reading many more of them. So, in The Power and the Glory, Green shows a situation where the church has been banished from the country. The protagonist is a priest gone bad, but who is aware of his corruption. Scenes of the flesh attract him and increase as he grows older, and he sleeps with a woman and begets a child. He loves his child of sin, but his pursuit of his vocation in his saving grace. He is pursued by the lieutenant, who is well meaning but misled. The priest is finally betrayed by a mestizo he goes to help. He is arrested, put into prison, and executed. Green portrays his characters vividly and realistically. The two main characters in this novel, namely the priest and the lieutenant, are nameless and represent ideologies rather than individuals. Both have their good points and weaknesses, and they serve as follies to each other. The novel depicts the conflict between good and evil in the outer physical world, as well as the inner world of the human mind, as seen in the case of the priest. When he dies, the evil is defeated and good triumphs. So, here we can understand what is the themes in the particular novel, The Power and the Glory. So, here we end our novel, The Power and the Glory.